Hello there, I'm Ziggy Kozicki. Welcome to another A to Zig. Today's program is about family matters, and I have with me Kristen McDonald-Rivet, who was a big activist and involved in programming here in the Tri-City Midland area, was involved with the community center, has a long history of involvement in community development issues and representing people. And I'm sure she'll share some more of that with you. This topic that we're talking about is broad, and I realize that we could probably spend several programs on family matters. We're going to focus in on child issues, child development, those kinds of things, maybe go off in some other directions. So join us here as we start talking about things that probably matter to almost everybody, because sooner or later it comes back to your family, right? So, starting with you, nice to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good. And we're excited that you're here, because this is a topic that everybody, I think, has an interest in. So let me start out by just asking you a general question. What do you think are the issues that you wake up and think about in the morning or go to bed with and think about that you think need more attention?
Well, let me start with a core fact about me, and that is I am the mom of six.
All right.
So I have...
So you have six things you think about all the time.
I have six things I think about when I wake up. So we have, my husband and I have 5 adult kids, and then we have one middle schooler, Elijah. He's 12. He's in middle school. Embarrassed by everything we say and do. Right?
Been there, yeah.
Right. But I actually have spent my entire career working to strengthen kids and families. So here in Midland, I just most recently was the president and CEO of the Greater Midland Community Centers. We run kids through our summer camps, basketball leagues, curling leagues, and also we're the largest early childhood provider in Midland County, caring for 350 kids every day.
Wow.
So I have spent my entire life getting up thinking about kids, not just my own, but kids in general. And right now, in particular, post-pandemic or in the middle of the pandemic, we still have a long way to go. I'm more worried about our kids than ever. They are really struggling to catch back up in school. It's been a really hard couple of years. There's been a lot of pervasive fear for everybody. And the other basic reality that's been true for a while is that there are a lot of families in Michigan really struggling to make ends meet. So we have a lot of kids, over 1 million of them across the state, who are in households that are every month, at the end of the month, really can't make all of the, meet all housing, food, utilities, those sorts of things are overwhelming Michigan families.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that I worry about, not just for right now in the present, but it's also as we think about the future of Michigan, we really have to start paying more attention to how families are doing economically. That huge divide we have between where most families are, most working families are, and where the wealthiest 1% are in this country and in this state, and think about how we get higher paying jobs so that we have more families that can thrive, and also how we strengthen our child care system.
Yeah, and I think you bring up something that's really important, is that everybody seems to support the idea of family, and the idea of families matter. And you hear everybody talk about it, and they say, you know, we're really about the family and so forth. But when you look at policies, particularly economic policies, it seems like families always get shorted, whether it's in their school system, whether it's in their community. And when you look at the Tri-City area or Mid-Michigan area, there are some communities that are struggling and are trying to patch together programs. Now, Midland, for instance, is probably an exception because it has a large endowment and it's had a long history of funding. But when you get outside of the Midland area, the other communities, they don't have the resources. And in some cases, you have volunteers who are trying to put together community programs with kids,
right.
And they get some donations, and fortunately there's foundations that help and so forth. So right across the whole board, the policies that we have to really help families sometimes seem more like lip service than actual translation into dollars or resources. What do you think we could do to change that?
I think that's a really good point, but I do want to push back on one thing.
Yeah.
And here in Midland, we absolutely have families that are struggling. So they're often not seen in the same way that they are in other communities, but 30% of families in Michigan, in Midland, are considered the working poor.
Okay.
So it's not as high as in other counties, but across the region, if you look at Saginaw, Bay City, and Midland together, we have 30,000 kids who are living in households that qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit, because I really want to talk about that.
Okay.
So the Earned Income Tax Credit is a pro-work financial assistance for families who are struggling. So if you're not working, you can't get it. Right now, Michigan has a very, very small EITC, but it was actually introduced a long time ago, championed by Ronald Reagan, is a federal program across the country. Most states have a match for that. Michigan has a very small match. There's a proposal right now and policies moving through Lansing to dramatically increase the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is 1 million kids statewide, but 30,000 right here in our region. It would be a game changer for families. It's been introduced by a Republican senator from Traverse City. The governor has come out in her State of the State this year and said that she supports it. It's been sitting in the legislature for 18 months.
18 months?
18 months.
That's a long time.
Yep, it absolutely is.
So when I hear 18 months or something like that, there's foot dragging there on purpose, right?
There is foot dragging for something. I think that we often hear political leaders talk about being pro-family.
Yeah.
They talk about family values.
I hear it all the time.
Or you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's easy to say. But when the rubber meets the road and you have to make funding decisions
Yeah.
of who is actually going to receive tax benefits, the proposal from Senator Schmidt in Traverse City represents the largest tax break for working families in Michigan's history.
Wow.
Republican senator,
Yeah.
not moving.
Well, that's sad to hear because we all know that if we have strong families, we have strong communities.
Absolutely.
If we have strong communities, we have a strong economy. And the business people who are always talking about how important economy is seem to disconnect from that.
Right.
Because they want a tax credit for business purposes, which I can understand because business requires incentives to keep going, and many times businesses are working on margins that are small, and
Absolutely.
the
Been there,
money
run a
that
business like
the
that.
money that comes in from the government makes the difference. It keeps them going. You know, farmers are a very good example of
Yeah.
that. If we didn't have farm subsidies, most people would not be farming. You know,
That's true.
they couldn't do it.
Well, actually, it's why the business community has come out hugely in favor of the big expansion in the EITC. So the Midland, Saginaw, and Bay Chambers of Commerce have all endorsed a large increase in the EITC. We have seen the Michigan Manufacturers, the Small Business Association, the United Ways across the state. This is something that has really started to gain a lot of attention from the business community, and I'll tell you why. Because it actually is a space that encourages people to come back into the workforce, which we're struggling with right now, post-pandemic.
Got a workplace shortage right now.
What we have found in surveying businesses in the Great Lakes Bay community is that their employees are not coming back to work because there is an incredible lack of affordable, accessible childcare.
Yeah.
So we know most kids live in houses where one or both of their parents work. So there has to be something that it helps nurture them during the day, nurtures their development, cares for them in a really high quality way, really good early care and education, really good child care. Michigan has one of the lowest child daycare subsidy rates in the country. So if you're a family struggling to meet child care bills, and child care is very expensive, it's very difficult to get the kind of support you need to pay for child care that is reliable and dependable for your kids. So the Earned Income Tax Credit is one of the things that gives parents a reward for working and cash back at tax time that helps them pay for child care bills. So we have to think about how we can create a system for kids in the first 5 years of life while their parents are working that is putting them on a pathway to school success, that is nurturing their development at that time when their brains are developing, and then most importantly, how we can reward child care professionals for doing work which are often 12, sometimes 14-hour days. There is very few other jobs where people are paid at that salary, where they are regularly thrown up on or had a toy thrown at them. It's very hard work to be a childcare professional. There's no point where you can be off. You are always on. You're always working. A toddler demands your constant attention. During nap time, childcare providers are sitting next to cots, rubbing backs, reading stories. The average salary of a childcare provider is less than $12 an hour.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's lots to do in that system.
Yeah, and I find that very interesting because during this COVID period, many people spent more time with their children.
Yep.
And I think they discovered two things. One, childcare is very difficult,
Right.
especially if you don't get a break. Secondly, educators are asked to do more things than anybody could really imagine. And three, that parents probably could spend more time with their children if they didn't have to work two jobs.
Right, and many of our parents are working 3 and 4 jobs.
Yeah.
So right now in Michigan, 59% of jobs in Michigan pay less than $47,000 a year.
Yeah, and
59%.
Yeah,
that's the majority of our jobs in Michigan are paying less than what it takes to live in a middle-class lifestyle for a family of 3.
that'd have been a great income in 1970.
It sure would have been.
Yeah, I mean, you could really get a long way with that. But with the prices going up in particular because of changes in the world economy, I was at a grocery store the other day, and the gal in front of me was getting groceries. And when the bill came up, and this was at Meijer's, it was $400.
Yeah.
And I stopped for a second, and I asked myself, have I ever been in a supermarket line where the person in front of me was going to spend that much money for groceries? And I thought, no, I don't think I can remember that.
Right.
So yeah, inflation, which of course is tied into the world economy, and we've gone through a whole series of changes, now puts even more pressure on families, particularly if they have children.
Right.
And the tax credit makes more sense now than probably even it did back 5 years ago.
Right. The child tax credit that came through the pandemic relief funds from Congress was a really good start, shown to reduce child poverty by 30%.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah,
but,
Lyndon
but it was
Johnson,
ended. But it was ended, right?
Lyndon Johnson couldn't do that with the Great Society. And here Congress, got to give them credit, passed legislation, immediately had an impact on families and child development, and it worked. And you think the light bulb would have went out, and they said, you know, this works. Why don't we just renew it? Because this is actually a very good policy. And I haven't seen the traction in that direction. Do you think it has to start at the state level?
I do think their leadership needs to come from the state level, but I also, and we could do a whole other show on the political climate, right?
Okay.
So right now we're living in a time where politicians are rewarded for dividing communities.
Yeah.
Right. That's how you get elected, by pointing your finger at people and saying there's your enemy.
Yeah.
But that is the climate that makes it really difficult for us to get real policies that benefit families. So we have things, we know they work, the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, really market rate child daycare subsidies, being able to support childcare in the same way we support our K-12 public school system. These are things that are proven to work, but there are very few places where we're having dialogue about how to help, right? How to move things that work forward.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pointing fingers and preparing for the next election.
Yeah,
happening
and I
in Lansing.
think most of the people probably who are listening to this have that same concern.
Right.
But I do think, and I see this, that people are in camps now. They listen to their news broadcasts. They have their circle of friends, and even though they might not come out and say it openly, as soon as they discover what political party you're in, they make a decision and a judgment based on that and think, oh, well, you're one of those and I'm one of here. What can we do to meld back towards common mutual goals, purposes, that and start with the family here, that take care of family matters so that everybody's family does well, whether you're rich, whether you're not.
Right.
What do you think?
I think that we have to actually go back to places where we're bringing people with different ideas around the table and talking about what we're all trying to get done. Most people care about the welfare of kids and families.
Yeah.
I've yet to meet somebody in this community that doesn't get up and think, how do we make this better for people? If we could pull leadership together to talk about what's really happening economically for most families, the struggle that exists, that we see across the entire region, where we see families that are losing their homes, that are no longer able to raise kids believing they're going to be able to help them get through college, which has become really expensive.
Yeah.
This become a place in a community where folks want to move here to raise their kids because there's such strong support systems, education systems, things to do with young children. That's how we get people moving into the region. And if we put that as an objective and invite people with diverse ideas and actual families to the table to say what's happening, what do we need, what are the things that are barriers for you to be successful and stable. We need to work on that agenda first. And it used to be like that. When you used to see policymakers that would hold dinners with Democrats and Republicans, or you would have forums at the local level where people were coming to the table with a solution mindset.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic made that really hard because anytime fear becomes as pervasive as it was in the early days of the pandemic, everybody was afraid. We didn't know remember we would all sterilize our groceries. We were afraid of the air, people wearing gloves everywhere.
Yeah.
We just had no idea. That sort of naturally took us to the places with people we felt comfortable with, people we felt safe with, and it divided us.
Yeah,
We have to start building back.
well, you kind of lead into this idea that we have these culture wars that are going on right
Absolutely.
now, and we have people that are very passionate about what they believe is the truth. And of course, truth is a perception for many people. It's what they want to believe. We certainly at least need more evidence in all of our decision making. And from my background, which is psychology, and as an educator, I always think evidence leads you back to mutual solutions. And even when I was on a school board, I would find that when people were passionate about something, if you started to get them to talk about the facts and started to look at the issues from an objective standpoint, it started a dialogue, which is really, really important. Do you think it's possible to get a dialogue going with people again about family matters, mutual issues?
I absolutely do. I begin and end every day in a place of optimism, and I think it's important to look at these issues like that. We have so many strengths of people who deeply care about the families in our community, so we have a lot to work with. I think that the facts will tell you this. We're losing population, particularly with young people and young families. We are seeing across the region declining education outcomes. We need to raise our college degree rate. We need to provide stronger post-secondary opportunities, apprenticeships, things that put kids on paths to livable wages. And we have a broken child care system. There's nobody that would disagree with that. The child care system is just fundamentally broken. We know those things to be true, and we also know our child poverty rate is growing. We have to fix it. You put those facts on the table and come with an open mind about what solutions we can move forward. Look at what's worked in the past and start the conversation there. We need more middle of the road, strong leaders who are willing to work with everybody with a good idea to run a path down the middle. And when that momentum starts, things like we're starting to see with the earned income tax credit, right? Where you have a Republican senator and a Democratic governor both saying this is a good idea, and you've got the United Ways, the child advocates, and the chambers of commerce saying this is a good idea. That is a blueprint for how we can get a lot of things done in the region and in this state. So it's hard to think about how to change the dialogue at the federal level. I'm not even going to begin to talk about how we get Congress to get along.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
You're going to need a lot of your psychology skills there.
Yeah, it's going to take years to get that
But
back in
there's
order.
particularly in Lansing the potential in the next legislative session with the new lines in the districts.
Yeah.
And a lot of new faces and a lot of new leaders to start different conversations. And I think it's really important when we think about policy that we think about what's the most important thing. And for me, the most important thing are kids and families. And many of our leaders in Lansing feel the same way.
We got about 5 minutes here.
Okay.
You brought up this idea of redistricting, which I think was brought about by a citizens' initiative
Right.
to try to change the way politicians work. And the whole idea was that politicians don't pick voters, voters pick politicians. And so I think it's a theme that is kind of running through the state right now. How do you think that can be translated in this Saginaw Valley, Midland region? What can we do to get the voters to be able to motivate the representatives better? Or how do you see it as an issue that needs some massaging?
I think that most voters do not realize that something has changed. So that there are folks that are cued into the political process see that. But what redistricting did, and whether we're talking about new county commission lines or whether we're talking about new state legislative lines or new congressional lines, it made more races competitive for both parties. So there is this opportunity to have real dialogue about community priorities in general elections, and we haven't seen that in Michigan for decades.
Yeah, we know that gerrymandering tends to pull people apart.
It does.
They get isolated. So by eliminating gerrymandering, we're forcing people towards the middle.
Right.
So this is an opportunity for the voters, but also for people in the community, because probably the ears of many politicians now is perked up to the idea that they're not in a comfortable seat. They could be defeated, and they have to sit down and listen to people they represent.
So I believe that every voter should start with questions about, tell me how you will support families and children as they grow.
Great idea.
What is your,
give me the details.
Give me the details of how you help children thrive. The other thing I think is really important, and I'm really committed to doing this, I want to ask people running for office what they're for, because mostly what we hear is what they're against.
Yeah.
Is what they're against.
Which is easy, because it's like it's their problem, it's their problem. It's not my problem.
We have gotten to a place where we've seen a lot of declining outcomes for kids, while we've seen a lot of this going on in people who are passing policies. And it's but there are a lot of things that matter, and the policies around kids and families matter at a state legislative, but there are also really important decisions that are happening in municipalities. The cities of Saginaw, Bay City, Saginaw County, Bay County are allocating millions and millions of federal pandemic recovery, ARPA funds, right? Thinking about how we are helping communities and families get back on their feet post-pandemic. Those decisions are happening right now. There are opportunities to ask questions about, how is this going to help our kids? And how is this going to help our families with the decisions that are happening through city and county commissions?
So
that's an important question.
If I'm thinking about some of the things you just said, family matters have an opportunity to rise to the top of the list of things that are being talked about in a lot of policy circles right now.
Yep.
If people want to take the initiative
Absolutely.
to support those things and actually bring those out, ask those questions, get involved. Make that one of the questions if they're at a town meeting or a school board meeting is, what's in it for the family?
There's one other point that I want to make that I think is really important. So I want to talk about when the dams burst.
Okay.
Because it just decimated so many of our families in Midland and Saginaw.
Yeah.
So when that happened, for about a week after, I ran one of the evacuation centers up in Mills Township.
Okay.
And in our evacuation center, we mostly had seniors.
Oh.
And it just worked out that way. It wasn't deliberate, but we had a lot of seniors who had lost everything.
Yeah.
And what we talk about families, and we want to talk about families as parents and young children. That's what we think about. But we also can't forget that we have so many seniors that started really struggling on fixed incomes. So as we think about the cost of things rising, the fact that their pensions are now taxed, right? And that the programs that help stabilize seniors that are really financially struggling are underfunded and very difficult for seniors to access. And we have to make sure that the senior health care is affordable, accessible, particularly when we're talking about medications.
Family is grandma
family is
and
across the
grandma
board.
all the way up to
Absolutely.
the toddler. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think these are important issues to consider. I do appreciate the fact that you came in and we could talk about
You're
this
welcome.
and raise maybe the interest in this in the future. Thank you for joining us today for A to Zig Family Matters. And Kristen is a person who, if you want to contact you, what's a good way to contact you if they want to have some dialogue with you?
They can go to my website, KristenMcDonaldRivet.com, or reach me through email, mcdonaldrivet@gmail.com.
Okay, good. So we'll make sure that we know that this is an advocate for family matters, and so forth. I do appreciate you tuning in to A to Zig Family Matters. And if you have any comments, please send them to MCTV or send them directly to me. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to our next opportunity.